Good morning, everyone. Thanks for your patience as we navigated Zoom. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our June I Am Tech Oregon interview sponsored by First Tech Federal Credit Union. I'm Ruthie Ditzler, TAO's Marketing and Regional Programs Coordinator, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm the moderator for our 2021 I Am Tech Oregon series, and I'm super excited to talk to today's guest about her career journey into tech. We have two members of the TAO team with me today, Justin Martinez and Kara Toronto. Justin does an incredible job keeping our virtual events running behind the scenes, and Kara is here to connect with folks in the chat. So if you have any questions for Katie or thoughts throughout the event, please feel free to hop on the conversation in the chat. Kara loves community and conversation. Just a quick couple of reminders before we start. All participants have been muted. I think we all are pretty familiar with the Zoom calls at this point, but please stay on mute unless one of us calls on you to talk, or if you have a question that you want to ask at the end, we'll talk through how that live Q&A is going to work. But you can always post your questions in the chat ahead of time. And if you want to support our guests, you identify with what we're saying, we encourage you to use all of the different icons to applaud or give a thumbs up just to make this a little bit more interactive. You're welcome to come on camera. It can be really nice for me and for our speaker just to see that we have folks in the audience who are real humans with real emotional reactions, which is awesome. This is just a half an hour. It's a super quick kind of coffee break, early lunch thing. It's going to speed by, but don't worry because we've saved some time at the end. We'll do a live Q&A using Mentimeter, and there's a fancy Q&A, like a QR code, and you can either use the code to submit your questions, or you can go to menti.com and submit your questions. But we'll reshare all of these details when we get to that point. So don't worry, we'll walk you through it. And then of course, you can also submit questions via the Zoom chat too. I encourage you to engage with TAO on social media. I'm the human behind TAO social media, and I love to have just see people's reactions, takeaways to stuff that happens at our events. So that would be awesome. And now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome our June I Am Tech Oregon guest, Katie Hinds, who is currently working as a UX designer at Extensis. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you.
So you have quite the fan club here, which is awesome. We love seeing all these folks from Extensis joining us today. And we just want to kick it off by, as I mentioned, you work as a UX designer, and I would love if you could just share a little bit more about yourself and kind of give us the elevator pitch about how you ended up in the career you find yourself in today.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of an interesting background. I was born and raised in Mexico, but my father is American and my mom is Honduran. So I have a little bit of mixed match of everything. I went to school out here in the States, and I pretty much fell into UX design a little bit. I had more of a marketing background to begin with. I think I have about 2 years worth of experience in marketing, and then decided to make the switch to UX design after I graduated university. So this is my work at Extensis is the first job experience that I've had in UX design. But I previously worked for Extensis as a marketing intern. So that's how to some like a very brief way of saying that, like, that's how I kind of got my jump start with Extensis.
Cool. And when we talked earlier, you gave me a little bit of the background of like how you decided to what you decided to study and what you're interested in. Can you kind of talk us through like what originally got you interested in UX design?
Yeah, so I started with marketing. I started studying marketing, but for one of my classes, like I had to take a prerequisite for a science requirement. So I ended up doing a web development class, which essentially kind of got me onto the interactive media design combined major path, which is pretty much how I got into that space. I loved the class. I thought I wanted to be a computer, like study computer science. But then after having a couple of conversations, like my professor just kind of told me, you might actually be more fit for this. So it was really like that professor that kind of had me get interested in it, but I never really thought it would be a career path for me. Not necessarily because I didn't like it. It was more because I was like, oh, I don't know if like I'm really meant to be a designer, or I didn't know if I was like good enough or even like good enough for the tech world, to be completely honest. But I pretty, that's why I focused myself mostly on marketing. But then like the more I did it, the more I was like, no, I think I have more of a passion for design, specifically for UX design and the tech world.
Yeah, that's awesome. The kind of prompting from someone who's like, hey, did you ever think about like how you are really actually good at this? You should give it a shot. Um, did you, through your career so far, I guess kind of through college, through your time working in marketing and at Extensis, have you seen yourself represented among your peers, among leadership? What are your thoughts and reflections about like identity and how it shows up in tech?
Um, as a Latin woman, I have not seen any other Latin UX designers. And I feel like in tech in general, I don't see a lot of Latin women. I don't know the exact statistic, but I feel like it's something ridiculous, like in the lower single digit numbers as far as like Latin women in tech. But as far as UX design though, I have seen a lot, like most of the UX designers I know are women. So that has always been really nice to see. And a lot of like my peers that I know are women that are UX designers. So I think in that sense, it's been nice that, you know, there's that camaraderie that I have people to talk to that have like the same experiences. But in tech, I don't think I see a lot of women, but even less Latin women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then how does that, like the question, I always ask the question about imposter syndrome because sometimes I suffer from debilitating imposter syndrome. Um, is that something that comes up for you in your work? Like what is kind of in your background, in your like growing up, like how has imposter syndrome shown up for you? And then what do you do to deal with it if it ever comes up?
It comes in waves. It definitely comes in waves. Especially when I first started my job at Extensis, and I mean, Chad is in here, my boss. Hi, Chad. He was on probably like my best support system because I do remember the first couple months going like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know why you guys trust me with this. Like I would have, I don't know if panic attacks, I don't want to call them that, but I would fully just be like, I don't know how I have this position and I don't know if I don't know if I deserve it, but it was more like I don't know if I'm smart enough to figure this out. But I definitely had moments where it would definitely just fully drown me. But I mean, I had a great support system, and I think like the more, I guess the way I tackled it was just informing myself. I'd look at articles, I'd try to keep up, I'd watch tutorials. Like if I didn't feel certain about something, I just kind of kept trying to learn, if anything, and that helped me a lot. And I mean, growing up, it did come up a lot where, you know, there was classes like in my high school for computer science, and I thought I was interested in it, but I never thought it was smart enough. And the more I've kind of gone through my career, I'm like, I don't know why I didn't think I was smart enough, and I don't know necessarily where it was coming from, but I think slowly I've just kind of tried to push it aside and just learn on my own and use my support system is basically what I've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we talked before, it's like thinking back on those, you know, as women, kind of thinking back on those like moments you know, it's easy to like look back and be like, oh, wow, that was like a crossroads where like I could have joined computer science class or not, and I chose not to. And like, what would have happened had I decided to pursue that interest, you know, like where would I be now? And then thinking about like the just like across the board for like how many girls, you know, considering like STEM stuff, you know, that they decide that they're not smart enough or they've had that messaging or something. I mean, it's, yeah, just makes this huge impact. It's kind of overwhelming.
It really does, yeah.
Yeah. But I love what you're talking about, just like the approach to like chipping away at imposter syndrome by just doing the, you know, just learning and like doing the work and kind of building your confidence that way. I think that that's something that works really well for me too. It's like, well, like I know that I'm smart enough to do the research to like figure this out. So that means I'm smart enough to do it, I guess. Thanks for sharing all that. What is your kind of transitioning? What is your favorite thing about UX design? What do you like best about what you do?
I think that's hard for me to choose, like just one favorite thing. I think more than anything, I like the challenge. I think that every day is different. There's always a problem to solve. There's always a question to answer. So I think it definitely keeps me on my toes. I don't think there hasn't been a day or like month to month, I'm working on the same product, but there's not really like the same thing. It's not repetitive. It's just constantly like something new, and it's just constantly changing. And I think that keeps me fresh and interested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like before I heard you talk about too, just like creativity and how you're such a creative person and like being able to have that in your day to day. What do you think about like the best career decision you've ever made? Was there something that you look back on where you're like, that was like, yes, I like did the right thing in that moment and it set me on this path, and like I definitely like, you know, appreciate that I did that?
I am gonna be, yeah, I mean, working at Extensis and taking my job at Extensis, they gave me an opportunity I couldn't turn down. And I am forever grateful for that opportunity, because I don't think I would have learned as quickly as I have, and had it not been for that job and the people supporting me. So I think that was, I mean, initially I was pretty hard-headed on not wanting to live in Oregon, if I'm being super open and honest. But you know, the position was offered to me, and the opportunity kind of arose. So I'm happy I didn't turn it down, because I've learned so much, and I've gotten to meet some and work with some incredible people.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Plug for Extensis. There you go. Free marketing. What's anything that you wish you had done differently? Like looking back, you're like, wow, that was not a great career decision. Never doing that again.
I don't know if there's anything in particular. I think more than anything, I wish I would have stood up for myself a lot earlier. There was a lot of moments where I didn't, and I just stay quiet. So I think I don't do that anymore. But for the most part, like, I think I wish I would have done that earlier and believed in myself. But as far as like actual regrets, I don't think I have anything I truly regret in my career, just because it's all kind of been stepping stones and learning experiences. So that's, I don't know, that's how I see it anyways.
Yeah, it's like, well, if you find a job or you do something that you like, you don't really like, it is just a learning opportunity to be like, well, that was great, and I don't really want to do that anymore. So I'm going to use that as like a pivot to get to the next point, to find something that's a better fit, or, you know, just a better opportunity. What about mentors? I mean, we've talked just in this short conversation alone, just kind of quite a bit about being a woman in tech and being a new designer and kind of coming into this position where you felt like you had no idea what you were doing. Have you had any mentors that have influenced you? And I guess also, like, if there was a potential UX designer on the call right now, what suggestions do you have for other folks who are looking for mentorship?
I don't know if I can say I have like a specific mentor. I think I've had multiple mentors, but not necessarily like UX designers. I think I've had a lot of people be my cheerleaders, and I think that that's kind of what I needed at the time, just to have someone believe in me a little bit. But I have contacts with a lot of UX designers, and some of them are higher up, and I think when it comes to conversations of like, am I learning the right things? Should I be learning something else? I think in that sense, that has been a great guiding path for me, but I don't have a very consistent conversations with them. So I don't know if to call them mentors or not, but I would consider their guidance like very valuable for me and my growth. And as far as like recommendations for people is just kind of keeping up to date with either, I think one of my favorite things right now has been, and this is going to make me sound like very much a millennial, but I follow a lot of people on Instagram that have like little quick slides of like, where should this button go, or what colors, and just like small, quick, just information to consume that helps me keep up to date. Or, you know, I keep up to date with LinkedIn Learning or Medium posts or things like that. So I think in that sense, I've tried to network myself around with UX designers, but not necessarily like, I haven't necessarily found a mentor that I can be like, this is my mentor.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there, I mean, we're lucky because there is so much out there, right? If you want to learn something on the internet these days, you can find what you want to learn. I think that that's those little like soundbite, little short like ideas for people who are kind of influencers or experts in their area. That's a really smart idea. Okay, so I just have one more question, and then we're going to open it up for audience Q&A. So audience, get ready with your questions. Start thinking about what you want to ask Katie about her experience. I'd love to know, like, if you could share one piece of wisdom that has benefited you either in your life or your career, what would it be? What's something that you kind of think about?
So I have one Post-it note that I keep like right on my table, basically, that I feel like when I read it, it was very useful for UX design, but it's just basically, I'm going to butcher the name, but it's by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I don't know how to, I'm sorry. Exupéry it's French, but it says perfection is achieved not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. And I think that that's very, I don't know if it's appropriate for every sense of my life, but I think for UX design, it's what essentially adds value. Like, don't just keep adding things that look pretty or, you know, you think people want, but it's just more what is, yeah, strip everything else that's not needed away. So
yeah, it's like, what are the like very like the minimal like elements you need to achieve something? That's, yeah, seems like that's something that could definitely like advice that could carry over into life beyond being a UX designer for sure. Like strip it away, like don't need it, let it go. Okay, awesome. Thanks for the quick round of questions. I'd love to open it up to see if there are any questions coming in from the audience. So we like to use Mentimeter just because it's a little bit more interactive than Zoom chat, which we all, I'm sure, are very bored of at this point. So if you have questions for Katie, you can either use the QR code with your phone, or you can go to menti.com, and then there's this code here at the bottom, and you can enter that, and it'll take you to a screen where you can put in a question, and we are excited to see the questions that folks have for Katie. We'll give a little bit of time. It looks like we're ready to go, Justin. Cool. Are you able to show it on the screen, Justin?
I have them coming in, but I can't get them to pull up. I'm sorry, everyone. So I'll read them out loud.
Okay, cool. Justin, take it away with the Q&A.
Okay. There's a question that I wanted to leave in here. It says, who's your mentor or hero in tech? And you kind of answered that already. I was curious if you remembered the handles for those Instagram accounts, because it might be helpful for other UX designers to follow too.
Ooh, I don't know them off of the top of my head, but I'm happy to email them to you later if that's useful to you.
Yeah, that would be great. We'll include that in the follow-up email that we send out to everybody, so y'all can check those people out too. And then we have another question that's come in. What is your advice for making your voice heard as a young or entry-level designer?
Oh, that's a hard one. I mean, I'm pretty hard-headed by nature, but I think in general, what's helped me a lot is asking for help, and kind of noticing who has your back a lot of the times. And a lot of it is doing research. And I know I've mentioned that before, but I think it is doing your research, like knowing talking points, knowing your value, knowing what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that to some degree gives me a lot of backbone, rather than just coming to the table and just saying like, I think I deserve this, or I think it's supposed to be this way, but rather like, hey, I have all of these resources that show me this thing and this isn't adding up for me. So I think in that sense, that's what helped me, is just staying informed on myself and like just in general.
Awesome, love that. The next one says, your progression and growth is really inspiring. I'm curious, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years?
Oh, I think I want to continue growing with how I am today. I do see myself at some point taking on like a managerial role. Maybe in 10 years, I could see myself maybe doing something like on my own, like a company, a business, or, you know, I see myself just continuing to climb and just continuing to learn. But I right now at this moment, I don't know if I'm done with just the design work, but I do see myself in a managerial position in the future.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really great questions in here. Do you have some insight or comments on the paradigm shifts in the UX or in UX, as there's a growing youth movement? Do you see the influx of youth into UX design shifting how UX is done and experienced? And do you have any insights on that particular idea?
Yeah, I do think it's shifted a lot, because I think a lot of the younger generation, and something that I really admire about the young generation, is that they're a lot more aware. And I don't know if it's like the internet or just resources that they have, but they're a lot more aware of both diversity, but also like accessibility needs. And it seems like even if you see things like TikTok, like they're doing like closed captions, and they're doing things like, you know, things that, you know, even Instagram hasn't really caught up to yet. And I think that is all pretty much being driven by the younger generations. And I guess to some degree, like younger UX designers that are just more aware and have access to more resources. So I think in that sense, it's been great to see.
Yeah, that's cool. That's great to hear. That's promising. Our next question, do you find that there are any barriers to conflict management and communicating based on you being both Latin and female? Oh, this is from Marty. Hi, Marty. As an African-American male, I find a few LABD minds in business.
What's LABD minds?
Marty, you can come off mute if you want to elaborate.
Wait, landmines.
I'm sorry, landmines.
Oh, sorry. So can you repeat the whole question again?
Do you find that there are any barriers to conflict management and communicating based on you being both Latin and female?
Yes. I feel like a lot of the times I am walking on eggshells to some degree. I think there's, so I don't know how to explain this, but yeah, I think it's a lot of, I don't want to say playing the game, but figuring out how much it's a balance of knowing my resources, but also I know I'm a minority in the space. So it's just kind of like, I need to be able to like take up space, but also like recognize where I am in my space. I don't know if that makes any sense in general, but I'm very careful with my words and how I speak my words and who I speak those words to. So I think those are the landmines, and I think it takes a minute to assess. And I think that's like I think like I don't know if superpower is the right word, but it's just kind of like, I think a lot of it is observing people and listening and kind of taking in people before I decide like, all right, these are people I can actually speak to in a certain way, or these are people like, oh no, I have to take a step back and just be quiet here. And I think it's a balance between like who and when I'm able to make those speaking ups, and it's tough, but that's kind of a little bit the reality.
That's the question, because I just think because I'm an old guy, so I just always wonder, because does it ever change, you know? So it's good to know that, well, I guess it's not necessarily good to know. I'm just curious to see that it's still something that you have to navigate. So it's tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we have 2 more in. How do you incorporate more diverse perspectives into your design, or challenge others to think about a more diverse design perspective?
I think this is something, and I mean, I recognize that I very much am like a white looking woman. So I think, but I think in a lot of ways, because of my background, like speaking multiple languages, I've surrounded myself with a lot of people from diverse backgrounds, and I've also grown up with people that have disabilities. So knowing those things, I think as I design for people, I'm also thinking about the people I've surrounded myself with. And so like, I think about my own personal challenges, or like even my family's struggle, like with when it comes to like language barriers or like color blindness or, speech impediments. So things like that always come into my head, because so I guess my biggest advice is like, surround yourself with people that have different abilities and different backgrounds, and ask them questions when it's not something that you don't like I'm not colorblind, but I have multiple people in my life that are. So I know that when I'm doing something, I'm like, does this come across the right way it's supposed to? Because if it doesn't, then I haven't done my job right. So I think in that sense, that's how I bring it in, is I use the people around me and the diverse backgrounds around me to help me become a better designer, because I can't always think about everything that everyone has to deal with. But if I bring them into like the opinions, they'll be able to help me.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. I too, my last name's Martinez. My father's from Mexico, but nobody guesses I'm half Mexican, but that's the reality. So it's everybody has their own unique experiences and lenses, but you can't speak for everyone's experience. So surrounding yourself with that and having those resources while also sharing your own is really impactful. I know we're at time, but there's one last really good question. What advice do you have for young girls that want to get into tech?
Do it. Like if there's even like a small interest, just do it. I think I beat myself up too many years and let a lot of people just tell me that I wasn't smart enough or think that I wasn't smart enough. And I think if you have an interest in it, just do it. And if things might shift, and I think it's just a lot of just rolling with the punches, and just kind of like, if something doesn't click, then try something else. But if there is an interest, just try it. It's basically my biggest recommendation I can give.
Awesome. I love it. Ruth, do you want to
Katie.
take it away? I'm sorry for stealing, but
no,
that was my quick.
It's good to share the spotlight. I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Katie, and thanks to everyone for those awesome questions. We really appreciate your time and you sharing your experience and expertise with us. And I think it's, UX design is a super interesting field. So this recording will be available on our YouTube channel for folks to share and watch. And so we'll be sure to share it with anyone who's interested in UX design. Coming up in July, our next conversation is going to be on July 8th. It's a conversation with Dan Warner, who's the CEO at Veravest. So registration for that event is live at techoregon.org/events. And we'll also send a registration link out with the feedback survey for today's event. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Remember, I am Tech Oregon, and we are wishing you all a beautiful rest of your Thursday. We'll see you again, hopefully next month for our next I Am Tech Oregon. Thank you, Katie.